Welcome to LiBo. Have you ever wondered why some people work day and night, yet still feel stuck? Why do most businesses become complicated, stressful, and exhausting instead of simple and meaningful? Do you really need investors, a huge team, endless meetings, and a perfect plan to build something successful? Or is the modern way of working completely broken? In this audiobook, we'll explore the powerful ideas from REWORK, a book that challenges almost every traditional business rule people blindly follow. You'll discover why working more hours often creates less productivity, why planning too much can destroy action, why small teams beat big companies, and how some of the most successful businesses in the world grew by doing less, not more. This isn't just a book for entrepreneurs. It's for creators, students, freelancers, professionals, dreamers, anyone who wants to work smarter, think differently, and build a life with more freedom and less chaos. So sit back, relax, and let's rework the way we think about work, business, creativity, and success. This is LiBo, and let's begin. Part 1. The New Reality. Most people grow up believing business is difficult by design. They believe success belongs only to people with MBA degrees, wealthy families, powerful connections, giant offices, investors, and teams working 18 hours a day under pressure and stress. For years, the world sold us a very specific image of success. A man in a suit, a packed calendar, endless meetings, late-night emails, coffee-fueled exhaustion, sacrificed weekends, and somehow, all of that became a symbol of ambition. But here's the strange part. The more technology advanced, the more complicated work became. We invented tools to save time. Yet people became busier than ever. We created faster communication. Yet attention spans became weaker. We built modern offices to improve collaboration. Yet employees became emotionally drained, distracted, and creatively empty. And somewhere in the middle of all this noise, two entrepreneurs, Jason Fried and David Heinemeier Hansson, asked a dangerous question. What if almost everything the business world teaches is wrong? That single question became the foundation of REWORK. And the reason this book became revolutionary is because it doesn't try to motivate you with fantasies. It simply removes the lies. The authors built a company called 37 Signals, now known as Basecamp, with a very unusual approach. They didn't chase investors. They didn't build huge offices. They didn't hire massive teams. They didn't believe in endless growth for the sake of growth. Yet their products reached millions of people around the world. And that forced people to pay attention. Because suddenly, a small company was outperforming businesses 10 times larger. Not through hustle culture, not through burnout, but through clarity. And this is where the book begins. The authors explain that today's world is completely different from the old business world. Years ago, starting a business required huge money. You needed office space, machines, employees, advertising budgets, warehouses, physical stores. But now, one person with a laptop can build a global business from a bedroom. A designer in India can work with clients in New York. A creator in Brazil can sell digital products to people in Japan. A student with no degree can build an audience larger than traditional media companies. The internet changed the rules forever. The barriers that once protected giant corporations are collapsing. And this creates both opportunity and fear. Because when excuses disappear, responsibility appears. You can no longer say, "I don't have enough money. I need investors first. I need a perfect office. I need more people. I'll start someday." The truth becomes uncomfortable. Most people are not waiting for opportunity. They are waiting for certainty. And certainty almost never arrives. That's why so many brilliant ideas die inside human minds. Not because the ideas were bad, but because people waited too long to begin. The authors say something extremely powerful throughout the philosophy of this book. Action creates clarity. Not thinking. Not over-planning. Not dreaming. Action. Because most answers only appear after movement begins. Think about learning to swim. You can watch videos for months. Read books for years. study theories perfectly. But the moment you enter deep water, reality teaches faster than preparation ever could. Business works the same way. Life works the same way. And one of the biggest lies modern culture teaches is this idea that failure is necessary for success. You've probably heard phrases like, fail fast, fail often. Failure builds character. But REWORK challenges this mindset directly. The authors argue that success teaches more than failure ever can. Because when something works, you can study it, repeat it, improve it, and scale it. Failure only tells you what didn't work. Success reveals what does work. That's a completely different perspective from traditional motivational culture. And honestly, it makes sense. Imagine two musicians. One spends 10 years producing songs nobody listens to. Another creates one song people love, and studies deeply why it connected emotionally. Who learns faster? The second person. Because reality rewards feedback. This doesn't mean you'll never fail. Of course you will. Every creator faces rejection. Every entrepreneur makes mistakes. Every artist experiences doubt. But failure should not become your identity. And this is important because modern culture sometimes glorifies struggle too much. People proudly announce, I haven't slept in 3 days. I'm working 100 hours a week. I sacrificed everything, as if suffering automatically creates greatness. But the authors completely reject workaholism. They argue that exhaustion is not a badge of honor. It's a sign something is broken. A tired mind makes bad decisions. An overwhelmed mind loses creativity. A stressed life destroys long-term consistency. And this becomes obvious when you observe truly successful people carefully. Many of them are not running around chaotically. They are calm, focused, intentional. Because real productivity is not about doing more things. It's about doing the right things. There's a huge difference. Imagine two workers. The first person answers emails all day, attends meetings, switches tasks every 10 minutes, and looks extremely busy. The second person quietly spends 3 focused hours building something meaningful. At the end of the month, who created more value? Usually the second person. But society often rewards visible busyness over actual effectiveness. That's why people feel guilty resting, guilty sleeping, guilty taking breaks, as if being human is somehow laziness. The authors challenge this entire mindset. They remind us that work is not supposed to consume your entire existence. You are not a machine. And one of the most refreshing ideas in REWORK is this. You don't need permission to begin. You don't need someone to officially call you an entrepreneur. In fact, the book even criticizes the obsession with the word entrepreneur. Because many people love the image more than the actual work. They love talking about startups, posting motivational quotes, attending networking events, discussing ideas endlessly. But they avoid creating. And creation is the only thing that matters. Not titles. Not appearances. Not pretending. Real builders build. Quietly. Consistently. Without needing applause every 5 minutes. That's why the authors encourage people to stop romanticizing business and start simplifying it. Instead of asking, how do I become successful? How do I make something genuinely useful? That single shift changes everything. Because successful companies often begin with simple frustrations. Airbnb started because 2 founders couldn't afford rent. Uber started because finding taxis was difficult. Netflix started because late fees were annoying. Basecamp itself was created because the founders hated existing project management tools. That's the pattern. Great businesses often begin with irritation, a problem, a frustration, a need. And the people who solve meaningful problems create meaningful value. This is why the authors repeatedly say, scratch your own itch. Build something you personally want. Because when you deeply understand a problem, your solution becomes more authentic. You already know the pain points. You already know what feels frustrating. You already know what improvement would look like. And authenticity is difficult to fake. That's why some products instantly connect emotionally with people. They were built by someone who genuinely cared. Not by committees. Not by corporate politics. Not by market reports alone. But by real human experience. And perhaps the biggest lesson in this first part is this. The world no longer belongs only to giant corporations. It belongs to focused creators. To people willing to start before they feel ready. To people willing to simplify instead of complicate. To people brave enough to ignore old rules. Because the real world people talk about is often just fear wearing professional clothing. And the moment you stop blindly accepting outdated rules, you begin seeing opportunities everywhere. This is the beginning of reworking your mindset. And this is only the start. Part 2. Ignore the real world. One of the most dangerous phrases ever created is, "That would never work in the real world." At first, it sounds practical, logical, experienced. But if you observe carefully, you'll notice something strange. The people who say this phrase most often are usually the people who stopped trying long ago. Because the real world is often nothing more than invisible fear. Fear disguised as wisdom. And this is exactly what REWORK attacks in one of its most powerful sections. The authors explain that whenever someone introduces a fresh idea, society immediately responds with doubt. You can't do that. That's unrealistic. That's impossible. That's not how business works. History is filled with examples of people who ignored those voices. When Netflix started mailing DVDs, giant companies laughed. When Apple removed keyboards from smartphones, critics mocked them. When Airbnb asked strangers to sleep inside other strangers' homes, people thought it sounded insane. Yet all these ideas changed industries forever. Why? Because innovation rarely looks reasonable in the beginning. If an idea feels completely familiar, it's probably not revolutionary. And this is important because most people secretly seek social approval before taking action. They want everyone around them to agree first. But real creators understand something deeply uncomfortable. If everyone already agrees with your idea, you are probably late. Every breakthrough initially looks risky, strange, or unnecessary. Even the internet itself was once dismissed. Even online shopping sounded foolish. People said, "Why would anyone buy products online without touching them?" Today, billions of people do it daily. This teaches an important lesson. The future usually arrives quietly, while most people are busy defending the past. And the authors challenge readers to stop worshipping traditional business rules. Because many of those rules were created in completely different eras. Old industries needed huge offices because communication was difficult. Modern teams can collaborate globally with laptops. Old businesses needed giant advertising budgets. Today, one viral video can reach millions for free. Old companies required layers of managers because information moved slowly. Now information moves instantly. Yet many companies still operate with outdated systems created decades ago. It's like using an old paper map in the age of GPS. And this creates frustration everywhere. Employees spend entire days inside meetings that accomplish nothing. Workers answer endless emails instead of meaningful work. People stay busy without being productive. The authors call meetings toxic. And honestly, when you think about it, they have a point. Imagine this situation. A company schedules a 1-hour meeting with 10 employees. That doesn't cost 1 hour. It costs 10 hours. And most meetings interrupt people during their most creative moments. A designer loses concentration. A writer loses flow. A developer loses momentum. Then after the meeting ends, everyone needs another 20 minutes just to mentally recover. That's why interruptions quietly destroy productivity. Not laziness. Not lack of talent. Interruptions. And modern life is full of them. Notifications. Calls. Emails. Social media. Constant urgency. Everyone wants immediate responses. ASAP became a lifestyle. But the authors argue something powerful. Creative work requires uninterrupted focus. You cannot create meaningful things while constantly distracted. A novelist cannot write deep chapters while checking notifications every 3 minutes. An architect cannot design brilliant structures while sitting inside non-stop meetings. A musician cannot create emotional music while multitasking. Deep work requires mental space, silence, presence. And this becomes even more important in a world addicted to speed. Because today, many people confuse motion with progress. If they feel busy, they assume they're succeeding. But movement is not always advancement. Imagine sitting on a rocking chair. You're moving constantly, yet going nowhere. That perfectly describes many modern workplaces. And REWORK challenges this culture aggressively. The authors encourage people to simplify instead of expanding endlessly. Because growth itself is not always success. This idea shocks many people. Society teaches us that bigger automatically means better. Bigger office, bigger team, bigger company, bigger revenue. But bigger also creates bigger problems. More meetings, more politics, more confusion, more management, more stress. Sometimes growth destroys the very thing that made a company special in the first place. We've seen this happen repeatedly. A small restaurant becomes famous because of quality and care. Then expansion begins. Suddenly the food becomes average. Employees become robotic. Customers feel disconnected. The soul disappears. This is why the authors ask an uncomfortable question. Why grow? Not because growth is bad, but because unconscious growth can become dangerous. Many companies chase expansion simply because society expects it. Investors demand it. Competitors pressure them. Ego desires it. But what if a smaller, calmer, profitable business creates a better life? What if success means freedom instead of endless scaling? This is one of the most refreshing philosophies inside REWORK. The book gives permission to stay intentionally small. And in today's world, that idea feels revolutionary. Because many people don't actually want giant corporations. They want control over their time, meaningful work, creative freedom, peace of mind. And those things often disappear inside oversized systems. The authors themselves built a highly successful company with a very small team. That forced the business world to rethink old assumptions. Maybe you don't need hundreds of employees. Maybe you don't need investors. Maybe you don't need complicated structures. Maybe simplicity itself is a competitive advantage. And simplicity is much harder than complexity. Anyone can add features. Anyone can add meetings. Anyone can add rules. But removing unnecessary things requires clarity and confidence. Think about products people truly love. Google became popular because its homepage was simple. The iPhone became iconic because it reduced complexity. Amazon succeeded because buying became easier. Simplicity creates trust. And simplicity also applies to communication. The authors criticize fake corporate language heavily. Because companies often hide behind polished words that say absolutely nothing. We aim to maximize operational synergy while leveraging scalable solutions. Sounds intelligent. Means nothing. People connect with honesty, not jargon. That's why authentic brands feel human. And humans trust humans more than corporations pretending to sound important. This section of the book also attacks overplanning. And this idea is incredibly important. The authors say, planning is guessing. Not completely useless, but still guessing. Because reality changes constantly. Markets change. Technology changes. People change. Opportunities change. A 5-year business plan often becomes irrelevant within months. Then why do people obsess over perfect planning? Because planning feels safe. Action feels uncertain. Planning gives the illusion of control. But excessive planning often becomes sophisticated procrastination. Some people spend years preparing to start. Researching logos, business cards, brand colors, strategies, vision boards. Meanwhile, someone else launches immediately with imperfect tools and learns faster through real experience. Execution beats theory. Always. That doesn't mean you should be careless. It means you should avoid paralysis. And paralysis often comes from fear of imperfection. People delay launching because they want everything perfect first. Perfect website. Perfect product. Perfect timing. But perfection rarely exists. And waiting too long creates another danger. The world moves on without you. Ideas expire. Opportunities disappear. Energy fades. That's why the authors repeatedly encourage speed. Not rushed carelessness, but decisive movement. Launch. Learn. Adjust. Improve. Because real-world feedback is more valuable than endless internal debate. And perhaps one of the strongest lessons from this section is this. You need far less than you think. Most people overestimate what's required to begin. They think they need more money, more confidence, more experience, more permission. But history repeatedly proves otherwise. Many successful companies began with tiny teams and limited resources. In fact, constraints often create better creativity. When resources are limited, people focus harder. They remove distractions. They prioritize essentials. Limitations force innovation. And this applies beyond business. Some of the greatest art in history came from struggle, not abundance. Some of the greatest inventions emerged from necessity, not comfort. Pressure creates focus. And focus creates progress. That's why REWORK constantly pushes readers toward simplicity, clarity, and action. Not hustle culture. Not corporate theater. Not fake productivity. But meaningful work. Real creation. And the courage to ignore people trapped inside their version of the real world. Because every meaningful change in history began with someone willing to look unreasonable for a while. And maybe that person can be you too. Part 3. Start before you're ready. Most people spend their entire lives waiting. Waiting for the perfect moment. Waiting for confidence. Waiting for money. Waiting for approval. Waiting for certainty. And without realizing it, they slowly become spectators of their own potential. This is why one of the core messages of REWORK is brutally simple. Start now. Not later. Not someday. Not when conditions become perfect. Because conditions are never perfect. And the truth is, most successful people begin while feeling unprepared. They just don't advertise their fear publicly. Behind every confident entrepreneur was once a confused beginner. Behind every successful creator was once someone staring at a blank screen. Behind every powerful company was once a tiny, uncertain idea. But society usually sees only the finished result, not the awkward beginning. And this creates a dangerous illusion. People think successful individuals possessed magical certainty from the beginning. But confidence is usually the result of action, not the cause of it. A child learns to walk by falling repeatedly, not by studying balance theories for 5 years. Progress comes through movement. And this part of the book focuses deeply on removing excuses. Because humans are masters at creating intelligent-sounding reasons for delay. I don't have enough time. I need more resources. I'll begin once life becomes stable. But the authors challenge these excuses directly. Especially the excuse of time. Because if something truly matters to you, you find fragments of time instead of waiting for huge empty spaces. A person working a full-time job can still build something meaningful after work hours. A student can begin learning skills online for free. A creator can publish content using only a smartphone. Today, tools that once cost millions are available almost free. Technology democratized creation. A teenager with internet access now has opportunities kings never had centuries ago. You can learn business, filmmaking, coding, marketing, psychology, design, communication, all from your home. And yet many people still feel powerless. Why? Because information is no longer the problem. Execution is. Most people consume endlessly but create very little. They watch motivational videos, read productivity books, save inspirational quotes. But they delay the uncomfortable step, actually beginning. And beginning feels uncomfortable because action exposes reality. Dreaming is safe. Execution creates vulnerability. The moment you launch something, the world can judge it. People may criticize you, ignore you, reject you. That fear stops millions of talented individuals before they even start. But the authors make something very clear. You do not need to build something massive immediately. Start small. In fact, small beginnings are often stronger, because small projects teach faster. Imagine learning photography. Would you begin by opening a giant studio with expensive equipment? Or by simply taking photos daily and improving gradually? Small steps remove pressure, and consistent small progress eventually becomes powerful momentum. This is why the authors repeatedly emphasize building less, not more. Modern businesses often become obsessed with adding endless features. More buttons, more options, more complexity. But complexity confuses people. The authors encourage building only what truly matters first. They even say something memorable. Build half a product, not a half-assed product. That idea changes everything, because many companies try to impress people by doing too many things badly. Instead, focus on doing a few things exceptionally well. Apple became powerful partly because of this philosophy. Google succeeded because it simplified search. Instagram initially exploded because it focused almost entirely on photo sharing, simple and clear. Clarity attracts people. Confusion pushes them away. And simplicity requires courage. Because adding things feels productive. Removing things feels risky. But great creators understand subtraction is often more powerful than addition. Even in life, people clutter their schedules, clutter their minds, clutter their goals, then wonder why they feel exhausted. Focus creates power. Scattered attention creates weakness. And this section of Rework also discusses something extremely important: making decisions quickly. Many people become trapped in endless analysis. They discuss possibilities forever, debate tiny details endlessly, overthink every scenario. But decisions themselves create momentum. Even imperfect decisions move you forward. Indecision freezes everything. Think about a ship in the middle of the ocean. A ship slightly off course can still adjust direction while moving. But a ship standing completely still goes nowhere. Action creates information. That's why experienced entrepreneurs often decide faster than beginners. Not because they're careless, but because they understand something important. Most decisions are not permanent. You can adapt, improve, correct course. But people act as if every choice determines their entire future forever. This creates fear. And fear creates delay. The authors encourage readers to become comfortable with iteration. Launch something small. Observe feedback. Improve gradually. This is how real progress happens. Not through perfection from day one. In fact, perfectionism is often hidden fear. People say, "I'm waiting until it's perfect." But sometimes what they really mean is, "I'm afraid of being judged." And perfectionism silently destroys creativity. Because no work can improve while hidden forever. A writer becomes better by publishing. A speaker improves by speaking. A business evolves by interacting with customers. Reality sharpens skill faster than isolation. And this brings us to another powerful idea from the book. Scratch your own itch. The authors believe the best businesses often emerge from personal frustration. You experience a problem. You create a solution for yourself. Then others realize they need it too. This creates authenticity. Because you genuinely understand the pain point. You're not guessing emotionally. You've lived it. This is how many successful companies started. Spotify was built partly because music piracy made legal listening inconvenient. Slack emerged because a team needed better communication internally. Basecamp itself was created because the founders were frustrated with existing project management tools. The lesson is simple. Pay attention to frustration. Frustration often reveals opportunity. Whenever you think, "Why is this so complicated?" there's a chance millions of others feel the same. And people who solve irritating problems create enormous value. But here's where many people fail. They overestimate money and underestimate usefulness. The authors strongly criticize the obsession with outside funding. Because investors are not always freedom. Sometimes they become pressure. The moment someone else finances your dream, expectations change. Growth becomes mandatory. Speed becomes forced. Control becomes shared. That's why the book says, outside money should be Plan Z, not Plan A. Because many businesses today can begin incredibly lean. Especially online businesses. A laptop. Internet connection. Skill. Consistency. That alone can build life-changing opportunities today. And perhaps one of the most liberating lessons in this section is this. You need less than you think. Less money. Less equipment. Less validation. Less perfection. What you truly need is movement. Consistent movement. Because ideas are cheap. Execution is rare. Everyone has dreams. Few people act. And this is why the world rewards creators disproportionately. Not because they're always smarter, but because they move while others hesitate. The authors also criticize the modern obsession with startup culture itself. Because many people become addicted to appearing entrepreneurial instead of actually building something useful. Fancy offices, pitch decks, networking events, buzzwords. But none of those things guarantee value. Real businesses solve real problems. That's it. A local bakery solving hunger is more real than a flashy startup with no useful product. A freelancer helping clients effectively is more valuable than someone endlessly talking about future plans. Creation matters more than appearance. Always. And maybe the most important lesson from this part is this. Momentum changes identity. The moment you begin taking action consistently, you stop seeing yourself as someone who wants to create. You become a creator. Not because of titles, but because of behavior. Identity follows repeated action. A writer writes. A musician practices. An entrepreneur builds. Simple. And once momentum begins, fear slowly loses power. Because uncertainty becomes familiar. You stop expecting perfect clarity. You learn while moving. You adapt while growing. And eventually, you realize something beautiful. The biggest risk was never starting imperfectly. The biggest risk was waiting forever. Part 4. Progress over perfection. There's a hidden addiction silently controlling millions of people. Perfection. Not excellence. Not quality. Perfection. And at first glance, perfection sounds noble. People say, I just want to do my best. But many times, perfectionism is not about high standards. It's about fear. Fear of criticism. Fear of failure. Fear of looking inexperienced. Fear of releasing something incomplete. And because of this fear, countless ideas never leave human minds. Books remain unwritten. Businesses remain unstarted. Music remains unpublished. Dreams remain trapped inside notebooks. This is why REWORK repeatedly pushes one uncomfortable truth. Done is better than perfect. Because progress creates momentum. Perfection creates paralysis. And modern culture quietly encourages this paralysis. People compare their first attempt to someone else's 10th year. A beginner watches world-class creators online and immediately feels inadequate. A young entrepreneur compares their small project to billion-dollar companies. A new artist compares rough sketches to masterpieces. But what they forget is simple. Every expert was once embarrassingly average. Nobody begins extraordinary. Even the greatest companies in history started rough. Amazon's website looked primitive. Facebook was originally limited to college students. YouTube started with low-quality videos. Apple began inside a garage. But they improved through iteration, not through waiting endlessly before launching. This is one of the central philosophies of the book. Get something real into the world quickly. Because reality teaches faster than imagination. Customers reveal problems you never expected. Users behave differently than planned. New opportunities appear only after launch. Action creates information. And the authors strongly criticize excessive polishing before release. Because many businesses spend years secretly building products nobody actually wants. They hide behind preparation. research, meetings, forecasts, strategy sessions. Meanwhile, the market changes completely. The world rewards responsiveness, not endless preparation. And this becomes even more important in today's fast-moving digital age. Technology evolves rapidly. Consumer behavior changes constantly. Attention shifts quickly. A company moving slowly can become irrelevant almost overnight. That's why REWORK encourages flexibility over rigid planning. Instead of obsessing over long-term predictions, focus on immediate usefulness. What problem are you solving right now? That question matters more than complicated future fantasies. And this leads into another powerful idea from the book. Less mass. The authors compare businesses to physical objects. A heavy object is difficult to change direction. A lighter object adapts faster. Large corporations often struggle because they become too heavy. Too many approvals. Too many departments. Too much bureaucracy. A small team can make decisions in hours. A giant corporation may take months. And sometimes, by the time they finally react, the opportunity is gone. We see this repeatedly in business history. Kodak ignored digital photography. Blockbuster underestimated streaming. Nokia failed to adapt to smartphones. Not because they lacked resources, but because size slowed adaptation. Meanwhile, smaller, faster companies moved aggressively. This is why smallness can become an advantage instead of a weakness. A small creator can experiment quickly. A small business can connect personally with customers. A small team can focus deeply without corporate politics. And the authors encourage readers to embrace these advantages instead of feeling insecure about them. You do not need to look big to create value. In fact, pretending to be bigger than you often creates unnecessary stress. Some businesses waste enormous energy trying to appear successful. Luxury offices, complicated branding, corporate image building. But customers ultimately care about one thing. Does this solve my problem? That's it. Real value beats artificial image over time. Always. And one of the strongest sections of this philosophy involves learning to say no. Because growth creates endless distractions. New opportunities. New features. New partnerships. New ideas. At first, everything sounds exciting. But constant expansion destroys focus. Imagine trying to dig 10 wells at once. You may never reach water. But one deep focused effort changes everything. This is why successful creators often appear repetitive. They focus deeply on fewer things. Not because they lack imagination, but because concentrated energy creates results. The authors even argue that constraints improve creativity. And history proves this repeatedly. Some of the greatest films were made with limited budgets. Some of the greatest inventions emerged during scarcity. When resources are unlimited, people become careless. When resources are limited, people become inventive. This applies personally too. Sometimes limitations force hidden strengths to emerge. A person with limited money learns resourcefulness. A small team learns efficiency. A creator with fewer tools learns creativity. Comfort rarely produces innovation. Pressure often does. And this connects directly to another major theme in REWORK: underdoing things. Modern business culture constantly encourages overwork. More meetings. More hours. More hustle. More urgency. But the authors ask something radical. What if many things simply don't need to be done? This question is powerful because businesses accumulate unnecessary habits over time. Reports nobody reads. Meetings nobody enjoys. Processes nobody understands. People continue them simply because that's how it's always been done. But tradition alone is not intelligence. Sometimes the smartest move is elimination. Remove unnecessary complexity. Remove distractions. Remove endless rules. Simplicity creates speed. And speed creates adaptability. This philosophy also applies beautifully to communication. The authors strongly criticize long, unclear writing. Because unclear communication creates confusion. And confusion wastes energy. A good communicator respects other people's time. That's why simple writing often feels more powerful. Simple does not mean unintelligent. In fact, simplicity usually requires deeper understanding. Anyone can make something sound complicated. Very few people can explain complex ideas clearly. Albert Einstein once said, "If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough." And great businesses understand this deeply. The clearest message often wins. That's why memorable brands communicate simply. Nike. Just do it. Apple. Think different. Simple. Human. Clear. Clarity creates emotional connection. And emotional connection matters more than people realize. Because humans are not purely logical creatures. People buy feelings. Trust. Relief. Excitement. Belonging. Confidence. The companies that understand human emotion build stronger relationships. And this is why authenticity becomes so powerful. The authors encourage businesses to show personality instead of sounding robotic. Many corporations communicate like machines. Cold. Generic. Emotionless. But humans connect with humans. That's why independent creators often build loyal audiences faster than giant corporations. People feel authenticity. They sense honesty. And honesty builds trust. This section of the book also challenges another dangerous myth. That work must become your entire identity. Modern hustle culture glorifies obsession. People proudly sacrifice sleep, health, relationships, and peace in pursuit of success. But REWORK rejects this completely. The authors believe work should support life, not consume it. And this idea feels revolutionary today. Because many people secretly believe burnout is the price of ambition. But burnout destroys creativity. A tired mind loses sharpness. An exhausted body loses energy. An overwhelmed soul loses joy. Long-term success requires sustainability. Think about elite athletes. They don't train at maximum intensity every second. Recovery matters. Rest matters. Balance matters. Without recovery, performance collapses. Life works the same way. And perhaps the deepest message hidden inside this part is this. You don't need to build faster than everyone else. You need to build consistently. Consistency beats intensity over time. A person writing one page daily finishes books. A creator publishing regularly builds audiences. A business improving gradually becomes stronger year after year. Tiny repeated actions compound quietly. Just like interest. And this is important because society loves dramatic overnight success stories. But reality usually looks different. Most meaningful success grows slowly in silence before becoming visible publicly. People see the explosion. They ignore the years of invisible effort underneath. And that's why the authors encourage readers to stop chasing perfect outcomes immediately. Instead, focus on steady progress. Because progress builds confidence. Progress builds momentum. Progress builds identity. Perfection builds excuses. And in the end, the world rarely rewards the people who planned the longest. It rewards the people who created consistently, even while imperfect. Part 5. Competition is a trap. Most businesses are obsessed with competition. They monitor rivals constantly. Study pricing endlessly. Copy features. React emotionally to every market movement. And slowly, without realizing it, they lose their originality. This is one of the boldest ideas inside REWORK. Competition can become a trap. Because the moment you become obsessed with competitors, you stop listening to yourself. You stop innovating. You stop creating from clarity. Instead, you begin reacting. And reactive businesses rarely lead industries. They follow them. Think about what happens psychologically when someone becomes overly focused on competitors. Fear enters. Comparison enters. Urgency enters. Suddenly every move feels defensive. If they launched this feature, we need one too. If they lowered prices, we should panic. If they're growing faster, something is wrong. And without noticing, businesses begin copying each other until everything looks the same. This happens everywhere. restaurants with identical menus, apps with identical designs, creators with identical content styles, brands repeating identical marketing language. The result? A sea of sameness. And sameness is invisible. People remember originality, not imitation. This is why the authors encourage businesses to stop obsessing over what everyone else is doing. Instead, focus deeply on your own customers, your own philosophy, your own strengths. Because copying competitors creates weak identity, and weak identity creates weak connection. The most memorable companies in history didn't win by copying. They won by being different. Apple focused on simplicity when competitors focused on technical specifications. Southwest Airlines simplified flying while traditional airlines complicated it. Netflix reinvented entertainment instead of trying to become another television network. Difference creates attention, and attention creates opportunity. But being different requires courage. Because humans naturally seek safety through conformity. We fear standing out. Especially in business. People worry, what if nobody understands my idea? But ironically, playing too safe is often more dangerous. Because if you sound like everyone else, people forget you immediately. This is why REWORK repeatedly encourages businesses to embrace their uniqueness instead of hiding it. Your differences are not weaknesses. They are advantages. And one of the most powerful sections in this philosophy is the idea of building an audience by teaching. The authors explain that businesses should not hide knowledge. They should share it generously. This feels counterintuitive to many people. Traditional thinking says, protect your secrets. But in the modern world, teaching builds trust. When companies openly share useful insights, customers begin respecting them. Think about how many successful brands grew through education. Fitness trainers share workouts online. Chefs publish recipes. Designers teach techniques. Entrepreneurs share lessons publicly. And instead of losing customers, they often gain more. Why? Because expertise builds credibility. People trust individuals and businesses that consistently provide value before asking for money. This is one reason content creation became so powerful today. A person can build a global audience simply by sharing useful ideas consistently. And this changes business entirely. Marketing is no longer only advertising. Marketing is helping, teaching, entertaining, solving problems publicly. That's why the authors encourage businesses to build relationships instead of just transactions. Because customers today have endless choices. Products alone are not enough anymore. People connect emotionally with brands that feel human. And humanity requires honesty. The authors strongly criticize fake professionalism. You've probably seen it before. Companies using robotic language trying to sound important. Your request has been processed and forwarded accordingly. Why not simply say, "We got your message and we're working on it"? Human communication creates emotional warmth. Corporate jargon creates distance. And in a world overwhelmed with noise, authenticity stands out. This section also explores a fascinating idea. Emulating the drug dealer. Not literally, but psychologically. The authors explain that drug dealers understand something businesses often forget. Make your product easy to try. Reduce friction. Lower barriers. A customer unsure about your product becomes more comfortable when the risk feels small. That's why free trials became powerful. That's why sample content works. That's why freemium models exploded online. People resist commitment when uncertainty feels high. But once someone experiences real value personally, trust increases naturally. This is how many successful companies grew rapidly. Not through pressure, but through accessibility. And this ties into another powerful principle from the book. Focus on customers already using your product instead of endlessly chasing new people. Many businesses become obsessed with acquisition. More traffic, more customers, more visibility. But they ignore the people already supporting them. This is dangerous. Because loyal customers become your strongest marketing force. A satisfied customer tells friends. Returns repeatedly. builds trust organically. Word of mouth remains one of the most powerful forms of growth in history. And it's built through experience, not advertising alone. The authors emphasize that businesses should create products people genuinely love using, not just tolerate. And this requires attention to small details. Fast customer support, clear communication, thoughtful design, simplicity. People remember how businesses make them feel. That emotional memory matters enormously. Think about your favorite brands. Often, it's not just the product itself. It's the experience around it. The feeling of ease, reliability, clarity. Trust compounds slowly over time, and trust becomes priceless. This is why the authors strongly criticize overpromising. Many businesses try to impress customers with exaggerated claims. Revolutionary, life-changing, guaranteed success. But unrealistic promises eventually destroy credibility. Under-promise, over-deliver. That creates loyalty. And loyalty is far more valuable than temporary hype. The book also discusses something modern society desperately struggles with: attention. Because attention is one of the most valuable resources on earth now. Every company fights for it. Every platform competes for it. Every notification demands it. And because people are overwhelmed constantly, clarity becomes powerful. Simple messaging wins. Simple design wins. Simple products win. Complicated experiences mentally exhaust people. That's why minimalism became attractive psychologically. People crave relief from chaos. And the businesses that remove stress create emotional value. This is one reason companies like Apple built such strong loyalty. Their products often reduced technological intimidation. People felt simplicity, ease, confidence, and emotional experiences matter more than technical specifications for most consumers. The authors also encourage businesses to stop fearing criticism. Because the moment you create something meaningful, criticism becomes unavoidable. Some people will dislike your style, your approach, your philosophy. That's normal. Trying to please everyone creates blandness. Strong brands naturally attract some people and repel others. That's healthy, because identity requires boundaries. Imagine a restaurant trying to satisfy every possible taste. Italian, Chinese, Mexican, Indian, French, everything at once. The result would probably feel confused and mediocre. Focus creates identity. Identity creates loyalty. And perhaps one of the most important lessons in this section is this: you don't need massive audiences. You need the right audience. 1,000 deeply loyal supporters can create more meaningful success than millions of indifferent viewers. This idea changed the internet economy completely. Independent creators today build incredible businesses serving niche communities passionately. Small audiences with strong trust outperform giant audiences with weak connection. And this is liberating, because it means you don't need universal approval. You need genuine connection. And genuine connection only happens through authenticity. The authors repeatedly remind readers: be yourself. Speak clearly. Build honestly. Because pretending eventually becomes exhausting. Authenticity scales better than performance. And in the long run, originality always outlasts imitation. This is why competition becomes a trap. Because the moment you obsess over everyone else, you stop building something uniquely yours. And the businesses that truly change the world rarely begin by asking, how can we copy others better? They begin by asking, what can we create differently? Part 6. Workaholism doesn't create greatness. Modern society has turned exhaustion into status. People proudly say, I only slept 4 hours. I've been working non-stop. I'm grinding every single day. As if burnout itself is proof of ambition. And somewhere along the way, many people began believing that being constantly busy automatically means being important. But rework completely destroys this illusion. The authors argue that workaholism is not a badge of honor. It's often a sign of inefficiency, or insecurity, or poor systems. Because working more hours does not automatically produce better results. In fact, after a certain point, exhaustion begins damaging performance. A tired brain makes worse decisions. An exhausted body loses energy. A burned-out mind loses creativity. And creativity is one of the most valuable assets in modern work. This is why some people work 12 hours and accomplish less than someone focused deeply for 4. Productivity is not about time spent. It's about quality of attention. And attention is fragile. Every distraction weakens it. Every interruption breaks momentum. This is why the authors strongly criticize chaotic work environments, especially offices obsessed with non-stop communication, constant meetings, notifications, calls, emails, urgent requests. People rarely get uninterrupted time to think deeply anymore. And deep thinking is where meaningful work happens. Imagine asking a surgeon to stop every 5 minutes during surgery. Impossible. Yet many creative professionals are expected to work exactly like that. A designer gets interrupted constantly. A programmer answers endless messages. A writer jumps between notifications. Then companies wonder why productivity collapses. The problem isn't laziness. The problem is fragmentation. And this becomes even worse because society celebrates responsiveness over reflection. People are expected to reply instantly. ASAP culture dominates modern work. But speed without thought often creates mistakes. The authors believe calmness is underrated. And honestly, that idea feels revolutionary today. Because many businesses operate in permanent panic mode. Everything feels urgent. Everything feels critical. Everything feels immediate. But when everything becomes urgent, nothing truly is. Great work usually comes from clarity, not chaos. Think about elite athletes again. Before competition, they focus intensely. They rest properly, prepare mentally, protect concentration. They don't scatter their energy randomly. High performance requires recovery. Yet modern hustle culture often treats rest like weakness. People feel guilty relaxing, guilty sleeping, guilty taking breaks. But the truth is simple. Human beings are not machines. Even machines overheat without recovery. And the authors emphasize something extremely important. Work should support your life, not replace it. This sounds obvious. Yet millions of people structure life around work completely. Relationships become secondary. Health becomes secondary. Peace becomes secondary. Everything revolves around productivity. But eventually, imbalance creates consequences. Burnout, stress, anxiety, emotional emptiness. Many people secretly reach success externally while collapsing internally. And this is why REWORK pushes back aggressively against the culture of overwork. The authors themselves built a successful company while protecting personal freedom and balance. That challenged traditional assumptions. Because society often says, to build something meaningful, you must sacrifice your entire life. But the authors disagree. They believe sustainable success matters more than temporary intensity. Consistency beats burnout. And history supports this idea repeatedly. Many people sprint hard for short periods, then disappear completely from exhaustion. Meanwhile, calmer, focused individuals quietly improve year after year. Small consistent effort compounds massively over time. This applies everywhere. Fitness, writing, business, learning, relationships. Consistency creates transformation. Intensity without sustainability creates collapse. And one of the most fascinating ideas in this section is the difference between being a hero and building systems. Many businesses secretly depend on heroic behavior. Employees staying late constantly, fixing emergencies repeatedly, saving broken systems over and over. At first, this behavior looks admirable. But the authors argue something powerful. If your business constantly requires heroes, your system is broken. Because emergencies should be rare, not normal. A healthy business creates stability, not endless crisis management. This is such an important idea because many workplaces normalize dysfunction. Employees become addicted to urgency. They feel important while solving non-stop problems. But often those problems exist because the organization itself lacks clarity. And clarity solves more problems than overworking ever can. The authors encourage businesses to build smarter systems instead of glorifying exhaustion. That means clear communication, focused priorities, realistic workloads, simple processes. Simplicity reduces stress. Complexity multiplies it. And modern businesses often create unnecessary complexity everywhere. Too many rules, too many approvals, too many tools, too many meetings. Then people spend entire days working without producing meaningful results. This section also attacks another dangerous myth, that more hours automatically equal more dedication. But think carefully. If someone finishes quality work efficiently in 6 hours, are they less dedicated than someone struggling chaotically for 14? Of course not. Efficiency is intelligence, not laziness. And the authors encourage people to respect energy instead of worshipping exhaustion. Because energy fuels creativity. And creativity solves problems faster than brute force. A rested mind sees opportunities more clearly. An exhausted mind becomes reactive. That's why some of the best ideas arrive during walks, showers, vacations, or moments of stillness. Mental space matters. But modern life rarely allows space anymore. People consume information constantly. Phones, social media, news, entertainment, notifications. The mind never fully rests. And eventually, this constant stimulation weakens attention itself. The authors indirectly point toward something deeper here. Focus is becoming rare. And rare skills become valuable. A person capable of deep, uninterrupted work has a massive advantage today. Because most people are mentally fragmented. Distracted minds struggle to create meaningful things. That's why protecting attention matters so much. And this section also discusses the danger of creating artificial urgency. Some managers intentionally create pressure believing stress increases productivity. But fear rarely creates great creativity. It creates survival behavior. People stop experimenting, stop innovating, stop thinking long-term. They focus only on immediate pressure. Psychologically, humans become less creative under chronic stress. And creativity is essential in modern problem-solving. This is why calmer environments often produce stronger innovation. People think more clearly when fear decreases. The authors also emphasize trust heavily, especially trusting employees to manage their work responsibly. Micromanagement destroys morale. Nobody enjoys feeling constantly watched. And micromanagement also signals insecurity from leadership. Great leaders create clarity, then allow capable people room to execute. Control every tiny detail, and people mentally disengage. Freedom increases ownership. Ownership increases care. And perhaps one of the deepest lessons hidden inside this section is this. Life is happening now, not someday after success. Many people postpone happiness endlessly. I'll rest later. I'll enjoy life once I make enough money. I'll spend time with family after this phase. But phases become years, and years become lifetimes. The authors challenge readers to rethink the purpose of work entirely. Why build a business that destroys your health? Why chase success if your relationships collapse? Why create wealth without peace? These questions matter deeply, because society often teaches achievement without teaching balance. And balance is not weakness. Balance is sustainability. A candle burning twice as fast disappears twice as quickly. And many talented people vanish exactly this way, consumed by non-stop pressure. That's why the philosophy of rework feels refreshing. It reminds people that calm businesses can still become successful. Simple systems can still create impact. Smaller teams can still outperform giants. And meaningful work does not require destroying yourself in the process. Because in the end, the goal of success is not constant stress. It's freedom. Freedom to think clearly. Freedom to create meaningfully. Freedom to live fully. And no achievement is truly worth it if you lose yourself while chasing it. Part 7. Build a business, not an act. One of the biggest problems in modern business is pretending. Pretending to be bigger. Pretending to be more successful. Pretending to know everything. Pretending to have perfect systems. And strangely, many companies spend more energy maintaining appearances than creating real value. This is why REWORK repeatedly emphasizes authenticity. Because eventually, reality always exposes performance. And in today's internet-driven world, people recognize fake behavior faster than ever. Customers are smarter now. They can sense exaggerated marketing, empty promises, artificial branding. The modern world rewards transparency more than polished perfection. This is why some of the most trusted creators and businesses online openly share mistakes, struggles, and lessons. Not because weakness sells, but because honesty builds connection. People trust humans more than corporate masks. And this part of the book focuses deeply on building something genuine instead of building an illusion. Because many entrepreneurs secretly chase appearances more than usefulness. Fancy offices, luxury furniture, expensive logos, complex branding. But none of these things guarantee a meaningful business. The authors challenge this mindset directly. They argue that a business is not what you say. It's what you do consistently. And consistency builds reputation far more powerfully than marketing ever can. Think about the businesses people genuinely love. Usually, there's trust involved. You trust the quality. You trust the experience. You trust the people behind it. That trust wasn't built overnight. It was earned slowly through reliability. This is why the book repeatedly reminds readers. Actions speak louder than business plans. Because business plans often become fantasies. Beautiful documents predicting imaginary futures. Charts. Forecasts. Strategies. Yet reality rarely follows perfect plans. Markets change unexpectedly. Technology evolves rapidly. Customer behavior shifts constantly. That's why the authors criticize overplanning again and again. Not because planning is useless, but because excessive planning becomes avoidance. A way to feel productive without taking real risks. Execution reveals truth. Planning imagines possibility. And many people become addicted to imagination because reality feels uncomfortable. Reality includes criticism, uncertainty, failure, adjustment. But those experiences are necessary for growth. This section also discusses a powerful idea. Learning from customers instead of assuming everything internally. Many businesses build products based on assumptions. They think they know what people want. But assumptions are dangerous. Customers often behave differently than expected. This is why listening matters so much. Real feedback is priceless. And interestingly, the authors encourage businesses to stay close to customers personally. Not through endless layers of management, but through direct communication whenever possible. Because direct contact creates understanding. The moment businesses become too distant from real people, problems begin. Products lose humanity. Support becomes robotic. Decisions become disconnected from reality. And this is exactly what often happens inside giant corporations. The people making decisions sometimes never interact with actual users. Everything becomes numbers and reports. But human behavior cannot always be understood through spreadsheets alone. Emotion matters. Experience matters. Friction matters. And the best businesses pay attention to these invisible details carefully. This section also introduces one of the most refreshing business philosophies. Say no more often. Modern businesses are constantly tempted by expansion. New features, new markets, new products, new opportunities. Everything looks exciting, but endless expansion creates dilution. A company trying to do everything usually loses focus on what made it valuable initially. This happens to creators too. A person starts successfully with one clear message, then gradually begins chasing every trend. Every audience, every opportunity. Eventually the identity becomes blurry, and blurry brands are forgettable. Focus creates memorability. This is why the authors encourage businesses to protect simplicity aggressively. Because simplicity is fragile. Every unnecessary addition weakens clarity. Imagine a restaurant with a 200-page menu. Most customers feel overwhelmed immediately. But a smaller focused menu often creates confidence. The same applies to products, websites, communication, and even life itself. Too many choices create mental exhaustion. Clarity creates ease. And ease creates attraction. The authors also challenge the obsession with professionalism. Now this idea surprises many people. Because society teaches us to sound formal in business. But formal communication often feels cold and distant. The authors encourage businesses to communicate like real humans instead. Simple language. Direct honesty. Clear personality. This approach feels refreshing because people are tired of artificial corporate behavior. A customer would rather hear, "We made a mistake and we're fixing it," than, "We apologize for any inconvenience this unforeseen operational issue may have caused." One sounds human. The other sounds like a legal department wrote it. And humanity matters more than ever today. Especially online. Because digital communication removed many emotional cues. People cannot always see your face or hear your tone. So authenticity becomes even more important. This section also explores the idea of building an audience through openness. The authors believe businesses should share what they know instead of hiding behind secrecy. Teach people. Show processes. Explain ideas. This creates trust naturally. And trust compounds over time. Many successful companies today became media companies unintentionally. They educate audiences consistently. Think about creators on YouTube, podcasts, newsletters, or social media. The people who provide genuine value repeatedly build loyal communities. And communities are powerful. Because customers who feel emotionally connected become advocates, not just buyers. And this emotional loyalty cannot be purchased easily through advertising. It must be earned. The authors also discuss another important concept. Don't hire too quickly. This is fascinating because many businesses assume growth means immediately adding more people. But hiring introduces complexity. Communication becomes harder. Coordination becomes slower. Meetings increase. Culture changes. Sometimes businesses hire people simply to compensate for broken systems, instead of fixing the actual problem. And this creates unnecessary bloat. The authors encourage companies to remain lean as long as possible. Because smaller teams move faster, communicate clearer, adapt quicker. And when you do hire carefully, not desperately. A single wrong hire can create enormous damage emotionally and operationally, especially in small teams. This is why cultural alignment matters more than resumes sometimes. Skills can improve. Mindset is harder to change. And one of the most powerful ideas in this part is this. Great businesses are built around clarity, not complexity. Complexity impresses outsiders. Clarity helps customers. And customers are the only people who truly matter long-term. This philosophy appears everywhere inside REWORK. Remove unnecessary things. Simplify communication. Simplify products. Simplify systems. Because simplicity scales better psychologically. People naturally move toward what feels understandable. This section also criticizes the fear of making mistakes publicly. Many companies try so hard to appear flawless that they become emotionally distant. But people don't expect perfection. They expect honesty. A business admitting mistakes transparently often builds more trust than one pretending problems never exist. And this applies personally too. Human beings connect through vulnerability, not performance. That doesn't mean oversharing everything emotionally. It means being real. And perhaps the deepest lesson in this section is this. Build something you actually believe in. Not something designed only to impress people. Because fake enthusiasm eventually becomes exhausting. But genuine belief creates energy. When creators truly care about their work, audiences feel it. When businesses genuinely solve problems, customers sense it. Authenticity communicates silently. And in the long run, authenticity outlasts hype. Because hype attracts attention temporarily. But trust creates longevity. That's why the strongest businesses often feel surprisingly simple. Clear mission. Clear values. Clear communication. No unnecessary performance. No endless pretending. Just real people creating real value consistently. And maybe that's what true business actually is beneath all the noise. Not acting successful, but being genuinely useful. Part 8. Decisions, doubt, and the courage to move. Every meaningful journey eventually reaches a difficult point. Not the beginning. Not the exciting idea stage. But the middle. The stage where doubt appears. The stage where motivation fades. Results come slowly. Progress feels invisible. And suddenly, the dream that once felt exciting begins feeling heavy. This is where most people quit. Not because they lack talent, but because uncertainty becomes emotionally exhausting. And this is why REWORK repeatedly encourages people to trust movement over overthinking. Because doubt grows strongest when action stops. Think about fear carefully. Fear feeds on imagination. The longer you wait, the larger problems appear inside your mind. A small challenge becomes a disaster scenario. A tiny risk becomes a life-changing catastrophe. But once action begins, reality often becomes manageable. Not easy, but manageable. This is why movement matters psychologically. Action interrupts fear. And many successful people are not fearless at all. They simply learned how to move despite uncertainty. That's the difference. Because waiting for confidence before acting creates a trap. Confidence usually comes after repeated action, not before it. A musician gains confidence by performing repeatedly. A speaker gains confidence by speaking repeatedly. An entrepreneur gains confidence by building repeatedly. Experience reduces fear more effectively than motivation ever can. And this section of the book focuses heavily on making decisions quickly and moving forward. Because indecision drains enormous mental energy. People replay possibilities endlessly. What if this fails? What if I regret this? What if people judge me? And while they're trapped inside mental loops, life continues moving. Opportunities disappear quietly. This is why the authors encourage readers to stop treating every decision like life or death. Most choices are adjustable. Most mistakes are survivable. But indecision itself becomes dangerous because it creates stagnation. Imagine driving a car. You can correct direction while moving. But if you refuse to move until every road becomes perfectly visible, you stay parked forever. And life rarely reveals the entire path in advance. Clarity appears gradually, one step at a time. This section also challenges another modern obsession: the fear of being wrong publicly. Social media intensified this fear dramatically. People now feel observed constantly, judged constantly, compared constantly. And because of this, many individuals avoid trying new things entirely. They fear embarrassment more than regret. But the authors repeatedly remind readers that mistakes are normal parts of building anything meaningful. In fact, mistakes often reveal valuable information faster than success. A failed launch teaches. A difficult customer teaches. A wrong assumption teaches. Painful sometimes, but educational. And experienced creators stop viewing mistakes emotionally. Instead, they view them informationally. What can this teach me? That mindset changes everything. Because emotional attachment to perfection creates paralysis. But curiosity creates resilience. And resilience matters more than raw talent over long periods of time. History proves this repeatedly. Many successful individuals were not the smartest person in the room. They were simply the people who kept going longer. Consistency quietly defeats brilliance when brilliance becomes inconsistent. This is why the authors value persistence so highly. Not blind stubbornness, but adaptive persistence. Keep moving. Keep learning. Keep refining. Small improvements compound invisibly at first. Then suddenly, years later, people call it overnight success. But there's another important idea hidden inside this section. Not every opportunity deserves your attention. This matters deeply because modern life overwhelms people with options. New trends, new platforms, new strategies, new opportunities. Everything feels urgent, and many people become trapped chasing every shiny possibility. But scattered energy creates weak progress. Focus creates depth. The authors encourage readers to protect focus aggressively, because every yes costs something. Time, energy, attention. And attention is limited. You cannot build something meaningful while constantly switching directions. Imagine planting seeds in 100 different places but watering none consistently. Nothing grows deeply, but concentrated effort creates roots. This is why disciplined simplicity becomes so powerful. And simplicity requires elimination, not addition. The authors repeatedly emphasize removing unnecessary work, unnecessary meetings, unnecessary features, unnecessary complexity. Because complexity drains momentum. And momentum matters enormously in creative work. Momentum creates excitement. Momentum creates progress. Momentum creates belief. That's why long periods of inactivity become dangerous psychologically. People start doubting themselves, questioning their direction, overanalyzing everything. Action breaks this cycle. Even small action. Write one page. Build one feature. Send one email. Record one video. Tiny movement still creates momentum. And momentum creates emotional energy. This section also discusses the danger of seeking universal approval. Many creators secretly want everyone to like their work. But meaningful work naturally creates division sometimes. Strong opinions attract strong reactions. And trying to please everyone usually weakens originality. Think about iconic creators throughout history. Many faced criticism initially. Artists, writers, entrepreneurs, filmmakers. Innovation often feels uncomfortable at first because it challenges familiar expectations. And this is why courage matters. Not dramatic cinematic courage. Quiet courage. The courage to continue despite uncertainty. The courage to look inexperienced temporarily. The courage to create before feeling fully ready. And perhaps one of the most powerful messages in this part is this. You do not need massive transformations overnight. Small steady progress is enough. This idea sounds simple. But psychologically, people often underestimate compounding. A person improving 1% daily changes dramatically over years. A creator publishing consistently builds skill invisibly. A business improving gradually becomes strong quietly. Most transformation looks boring in the beginning. That's why many people quit too early. Because visible results lag behind effort initially. This happens everywhere. Fitness, learning, content creation, business. At first, effort feels disconnected from results. But persistence creates accumulation. And accumulation eventually creates breakthroughs. The authors also criticize the obsession with long-term predictions. Because nobody truly controls the future. Markets shift unexpectedly. Technology changes rapidly. Human behavior evolves constantly. This is why adaptability matters more than rigid certainty. The businesses that survive long-term are not always the biggest. Often, they're the most adaptable. The people who survive creatively are not always the most talented. Often, they're the most flexible emotionally. Adaptation creates longevity. Rigidity creates fragility. And this is deeply relevant today because the modern world changes faster than ever before. Jobs evolve rapidly. Industries transform constantly. Skills become outdated quickly, which means learning itself becomes one of the most important skills. Not memorizing. Learning. Curiosity becomes survival. The authors indirectly encourage readers to remain experimental. Keep testing. Keep learning. Keep adjusting. Because certainty can become dangerous. Overconfidence blinds people. But curiosity keeps people evolving. And perhaps the deepest truth hidden inside this section is this. The goal is not to eliminate uncertainty. The goal is to become stronger within uncertainty. Because uncertainty is life itself. No path comes with guarantees. No creator knows exactly what will happen. No entrepreneur controls every outcome. But people who keep moving despite uncertainty eventually discover opportunities invisible to those who stayed frozen. And this is the real difference between dreamers and builders. Dreamers wait for ideal conditions. Builders create movement despite imperfect conditions. One group imagines possibilities forever. The other slowly turns possibilities into reality. And in the end, success often belongs not to the people who knew the most, but to the people who kept going when doubt tried convincing them to stop. Part 9. Marketing is not manipulation. When most people hear the word marketing, they imagine advertisements, flashy slogans, aggressive sales tactics, pop-ups screaming for attention. But REWORK presents a very different philosophy. The authors believe marketing is not about manipulation. It's about communication. It's about helping people understand why your work matters. And this changes everything. Because many creators secretly hate marketing. They feel uncomfortable promoting themselves. They fear sounding arrogant or desperate. But the real problem is that society often associates marketing with dishonesty, fake urgency, exaggerated promises, emotional manipulation. Yet authentic marketing feels completely different. Authentic marketing educates, clarifies, builds trust. Think about the people or brands you genuinely admire online. Usually, they didn't win your trust through aggressive selling. They consistently provided value first. Useful ideas, helpful insights, clear communication. And over time, trust naturally formed. That's why the authors encourage businesses to market through teaching. Share what you know. Explain your process. Reveal your thinking. Help people solve problems. This approach creates long-term credibility. Because expertise demonstrated publicly becomes powerful. A chef sharing recipes builds trust. A designer teaching design principles builds authority. A business openly explaining lessons builds connection. And in the internet age, this becomes incredibly important. Because today, attention must be earned. People are overwhelmed with noise constantly. Advertisements everywhere. Notifications everywhere. Content everywhere. Which means interruption-based marketing becomes less effective over time. People ignore what feels manipulative, but they pay attention to what feels genuinely useful. This is why content became one of the strongest forms of marketing in modern business. Blogs, podcasts, YouTube videos, newsletters. These platforms allow businesses to build relationships instead of simply chasing transactions. And relationships create longevity. Because customers don't just buy products. They buy trust. This section of the book also emphasizes something fascinating. Standing for something. Many businesses try so hard not to offend anyone that they become emotionally invisible. Their messaging becomes safe, generic, forgettable. But memorable brands usually have strong perspectives. They believe something clearly. Apple challenged traditional computing culture. Nike celebrated athletes emotionally. Patagonia openly embraced environmental values. Strong identity creates emotional attraction. And emotional attraction creates loyalty. Of course, this also means some people may disagree with you. That's normal. Trying to appeal to absolutely everyone weakens personality. And personality matters more than people realize. Especially today. Because products themselves are increasingly easier to copy. Features can be duplicated. Pricing can be matched. Technology evolves rapidly. But identity is harder to replicate. That's why authentic voice becomes a competitive advantage. People connect with clarity and conviction, not corporate neutrality. The authors also discuss a powerful idea. Obscurity is a bigger problem than competition. This is important because many entrepreneurs fear competition excessively. What if someone already does this? But often, the bigger challenge is simply being noticed at all. The internet created incredible opportunities, but also incredible noise. Millions of creators publish daily. Millions of businesses compete for attention, which means clarity becomes survival. You must communicate simply, quickly, memorably. This is why the authors repeatedly encourage businesses to explain things in human language. Not corporate jargon. Not buzzwords. Not complexity designed to sound intelligent. Clear language wins. Always. Imagine two companies. One says, "Our integrated platform leverages scalable optimization solutions." Another says, "We help teams work together without chaos." Which one feels understandable immediately? The second. Clarity creates trust because people naturally distrust confusion. And confusion destroys momentum. Customers should not need mental gymnastics to understand your value. This section also talks about building an audience before desperately needing one. And this is such an important lesson. Many businesses ignore communication completely until sales decline. Then suddenly they panic and attempt aggressive marketing. But relationships take time. Trust compounds slowly. That's why consistent visibility matters. Not constant noise. There's a huge difference. The authors encourage businesses to share regularly and honestly. Small updates, thoughts, lessons, stories. This creates familiarity. And familiarity creates trust psychologically. People naturally prefer what feels familiar. This is one reason storytelling became such a powerful business tool. Stories create emotional memory. Facts alone are often forgotten quickly. But stories stay alive inside people's minds. A customer may forget product specifications, but remember how your brand made them feel. This is why great marketing often feels human instead of promotional. It creates emotional resonance. And one of the strongest lessons from this section is this. You don't need massive advertising budgets to build attention anymore. The internet changed leverage forever. A single insightful video can reach millions. A useful article can spread globally. A thoughtful post can build community. This creates extraordinary opportunity for small creators and businesses. But only if the content genuinely provides value. People share usefulness naturally. That's why authenticity matters so much. You cannot fake value consistently long term. And audiences become incredibly good at sensing insincerity. Especially online. The authors also criticize interruption-heavy marketing strategies. Cold spam. Aggressive pop-ups. Meaningless advertising. Because attention forced aggressively often creates resentment. Permission-based attention works better. When people choose to follow your work willingly, trust grows organically. And this changes the relationship completely. Instead of chasing customers constantly, you attract aligned people naturally. This section also explores something psychologically important. People buy confidence, not arrogance. Confidence. Customers want reassurance. They want clarity that you understand the problem, that you care, that your solution genuinely helps. This is why honest communication beats hype eventually. Hype may create temporary excitement, but trust creates lasting business. And trust requires consistency. If your product disappoints repeatedly, marketing cannot save it forever. Reality eventually wins. That's why the authors strongly emphasize building genuinely useful things first. Marketing amplifies value. It cannot permanently replace value. A weak product with amazing marketing eventually collapses. A strong product with authentic communication compounds over time. And perhaps one of the most refreshing ideas in this section is this. You don't need to sound professional to be respected. Many businesses hide personality behind formal communication because they fear appearing less credible. But personality builds memorability. And memorability matters enormously in crowded markets. People remember humans, not corporate robots. This is why some independent creators today build stronger audiences than giant media companies. Because they feel real. Audiences feel emotional connection. And emotional connection creates loyalty stronger than advertising alone ever could. The authors also encourage businesses to embrace transparency. Show behind-the-scenes work. Share lessons learned. Admit mistakes honestly. This feels risky at first. But transparency creates relatability. People trust brands that feel honest about imperfection, because perfection itself often feels fake. And perhaps the deepest lesson in this section is this: marketing is not separate from your business. It is your business communicating with the world. Every email, every interaction, every product detail, every support conversation, all of it shapes perception. Marketing is not only what you say, it's how people experience you. And the businesses that truly grow long-term are usually not the loudest. They are the clearest, the most useful, the most trustworthy. Because attention may open the door temporarily, but trust is what makes people stay. Part 10. The power of less. Modern culture constantly pushes people toward more. More money, more followers, more features, more meetings, more growth, more hustle. And slowly, without realizing it, people begin believing that more automatically means better. But one of the deepest ideas inside REWORK is the exact opposite. Sometimes less creates more power. Less noise creates more focus. Less complexity creates more clarity. Less distraction creates more creativity. And this philosophy appears everywhere throughout the book. The authors repeatedly encourage businesses to remove unnecessary things instead of endlessly adding new ones. Because addition is easy. Subtraction requires courage. Anyone can add more features, more rules, more meetings, more systems. But removing unnecessary things forces difficult questions. Does this actually matter? Does this improve people's lives? Or are we adding complexity just to feel productive? And many businesses avoid these questions because complexity creates the illusion of importance. Complicated systems make people feel sophisticated. But customers rarely love complexity. They love simplicity. Think about the products people become emotionally attached to. Usually they feel intuitive, easy, clear. You don't need instruction manuals for every action. This is why simplicity became one of the greatest competitive advantages in modern business. Because modern life already overwhelms people mentally. Too much information. Too many choices. Too many notifications. People are exhausted psychologically. And the businesses that reduce stress create emotional relief. That relief becomes valuable. This is one reason minimalist design became so powerful. Companies like Apple understood this deeply. Their products often removed friction instead of adding endless technical complexity. And people loved that feeling. Ease creates attraction. Confusion creates resistance. The authors also discuss something extremely important: deciding what not to do. This is one of the hardest skills in business and life. Because opportunities never stop appearing. New trends, new ideas, new possibilities. Everything feels exciting initially. But every new commitment costs attention. And attention is limited. A person trying to do everything eventually loses depth. This applies everywhere. Businesses launching endless products. Creators chasing every trend. People multitasking constantly. The result is usually fragmentation. Scattered energy. Weak execution. But concentrated effort creates momentum. Imagine sunlight hitting the ground normally. Warm but weak. Now imagine sunlight focused through a magnifying glass. Suddenly it creates fire. Focus multiplies power. And this is why the authors repeatedly emphasize simplicity and clarity. Because focus becomes impossible when life becomes overcrowded. This section also explores the danger of feature creep. A fascinating problem in modern business. A company creates a successful product, then slowly begins adding more and more features trying to satisfy everyone. At first, each addition seems harmless. But eventually the product becomes bloated, confusing, difficult to use. And ironically, the thing people originally loved disappears. We see this constantly in technology. Apps overloaded with options. Websites filled with distractions. Software requiring endless tutorials. Complexity grows quietly. And complexity creates friction. The authors encourage businesses to protect simplicity aggressively. Not because simplicity is easy, but because simplicity is valuable. And protecting simplicity requires discipline. You must resist unnecessary additions. Resist endless expansion. Resist trying to please everyone. This applies personally too. Many people overload their lives exactly the same way businesses overload products. Too many goals. Too many commitments. Too many distractions. Then wonder why they feel mentally exhausted. The human mind was not designed for non-stop stimulation. Rest matters. Silence matters. Stillness matters. But modern society often fears emptiness. People constantly fill every moment. Phones during meals. Music during silence. Scrolling during waiting. The mind never fully resets. And this constant stimulation weakens clarity. The authors indirectly point toward a powerful truth. Space creates quality. A clean room feels calmer. A clear schedule feels lighter. A focused product feels easier. Less noise improves attention. And attention shapes experience. This section also discusses the power of constraints again. Because limitations force prioritization. When resources are limited, you must ask, what matters most? And that question creates clarity. Unlimited options often create confusion. This is why some people become surprisingly creative under pressure. Constraints remove distractions. Imagine a filmmaker with a tiny budget. They cannot rely on expensive effects. So they focus harder on storytelling, character, emotion. Sometimes limitations produce better art than abundance. The same happens in business. Small teams often communicate better. Limited budgets encourage efficiency. Simple systems reduce confusion. And this challenges traditional assumptions about success. Because society teaches people to constantly scale bigger. But bigger is not automatically smarter. Bigger can also mean slower decisions, more politics, more confusion, more stress. The authors repeatedly encourage intentional growth instead of blind expansion. And this idea feels refreshing today. Because many people secretly don't want giant, complicated lives. They want freedom, time, peace, meaningful work. And sometimes smaller systems support those things better. This section also emphasizes another important principle. Say no by default. Now this sounds harsh initially, but it's powerful. Every yes creates responsibility. Every commitment consumes energy. And many people destroy focus because they cannot say no. They accept unnecessary meetings, unnecessary projects, unnecessary obligations. Eventually their schedule controls them completely. The authors encourage protecting time aggressively. Because time is not renewable. Money can return. Energy can recover. But time continuously disappears. And successful creators understand this deeply. They guard attention carefully. Not because they're selfish, but because meaningful work requires uninterrupted space. This section also critiques the obsession with speed for the sake of speed. Modern culture worships urgency. Faster replies. Faster growth. Faster scaling. But not everything improves through acceleration. Some things require patience. Trust takes time. Skill takes time. Mastery takes time. And trying to force unnatural speed often damages quality. The authors believe sustainable progress matters more than dramatic bursts of intensity. Small repeated improvement creates extraordinary results eventually. This idea sounds simple. But most people underestimate consistency because its results arrive slowly at first. Compounding is invisible initially, then suddenly powerful later. Just like planting a tree. For years it appears small. Then eventually the roots create enormous strength. And meaningful businesses often grow exactly like that. Quietly. Steadily. Without constant drama. The authors also discuss the importance of enough. This is such a profound concept. Because modern culture rarely teaches satisfaction. There's always another milestone. Another level. Another target. People chase endlessly without asking, how much is enough? And without this question, ambition becomes endless hunger. No achievement feels sufficient. But the authors challenge this mindset. Maybe success is not infinite expansion. Maybe success is building something meaningful that supports a good life. A calm life. A sustainable life. And that idea changes everything. Because then business becomes a tool for freedom, instead of a machine consuming your entire existence. And perhaps the deepest lesson hidden inside this section is this. The world constantly pressures you to add more. But wisdom often comes from knowing what to remove. Remove distraction. Remove unnecessary complexity. Remove fake urgency. Remove noise. Because once the unnecessary disappears, what truly matters finally becomes visible. And that clarity changes not only business, but life itself. Part 11. Hire slowly, lead clearly. One of the biggest myths in business is this. The moment a company starts growing, it must immediately hire more people. More employees. More managers. More departments. As if increasing headcount automatically means increasing success. But REWORK challenges this belief directly. The authors believe many companies hire too early. And often, they hire to solve problems that shouldn't exist in the first place. This is important because hiring creates complexity. Communication becomes harder. Coordination becomes slower. Meetings increase. Misunderstandings multiply. A small focused team can move incredibly fast. But the larger a system becomes, the heavier it gets emotionally and operationally. This doesn't mean growth is bad. It means unnecessary growth becomes dangerous. Many businesses hire simply because they assume that's what successful companies are supposed to do. But sometimes, adding people creates more work instead of less. Imagine hiring someone before systems are clear. Now existing employees must train them, answer questions, correct mistakes. Suddenly, productivity drops temporarily. And if the wrong person joins the team, the damage becomes even deeper. Energy changes. Culture changes. Trust weakens. That's why the authors repeatedly encourage businesses to stay lean as long as possible. Not out of fear, but out of intentionality. Because every new hire should solve a real problem, not satisfy ego. Some founders secretly love having large teams because it makes them feel important. Big office, big payroll, big hierarchy. But bigger does not automatically mean better leadership. In fact, great leadership often becomes more difficult as teams grow. And this section of the book focuses deeply on leadership itself. Not leadership through power, but leadership through clarity. Because confused leadership creates confused teams. People perform better when expectations are simple and understandable. Clarity reduces stress. Unclear communication creates anxiety. This is why the authors strongly criticize unnecessary meetings again. Because many meetings exist only because communication itself is broken. Instead of solving problems directly, companies schedule discussions endlessly. Hours disappear. Momentum disappears. Energy disappears. And many employees secretly leave meetings wondering, what was the point of that? The authors argue that meetings interrupt real work more than they support it. Especially creative work. A programmer deep in concentration loses flow after interruption. A writer loses emotional rhythm. A designer loses creative momentum. Then people need time to mentally restart again. And this hidden cost becomes enormous over weeks and months. That's why the book encourages asynchronous communication whenever possible. Not everything requires immediate interruption. Not everything requires real-time discussion. People should have space to think. Space to focus. Space to create. This becomes even more important because modern workplaces often confuse activity with productivity. Someone constantly talking may appear engaged. Meanwhile, the quiet, focused employee building meaningful work gets overlooked. But output matters more than appearance. Always. And one of the strongest ideas in this section is this. Hire great writers. Now at first, this sounds surprising. Why writers? Because writing reflects clarity of thought. A person who communicates clearly usually thinks clearly too. Good writing reduces confusion. And confusion is expensive. Misunderstandings waste time. Poor instructions create mistakes. Unclear priorities create frustration. Communication shapes culture more than most businesses realize. This is especially true in remote work environments. And the authors were early believers in remote work long before it became globally common. They believed people often work better away from noisy offices. Because offices are full of interruptions, constant conversations, random meetings, noise, distractions. Meanwhile, focused environments create deeper productivity. And modern technology now allows talented people from anywhere in the world to collaborate. This changed business permanently. A company no longer needs to hire only from one city. Talent became global. And this creates incredible opportunity. But it also increases the importance of trust. Remote work fails when leadership becomes obsessed with control. Micromanagement destroys morale quickly. Nobody enjoys feeling constantly monitored. The authors believe leadership should focus on outcomes instead of surveillance. Did the work get done well? That matters more than pretending to look busy for 8 straight hours. Because many office environments reward performance theater. Employees sitting at desks looking active, even when real productivity is low. Remote work exposed this illusion. And it forced many companies to rethink how work actually functions. This section also challenges another dangerous idea, that managers must always have answers. But great leaders are not perfect know-it-alls. Great leaders create environments where problems can be solved honestly, where communication feels safe, where ideas matter more than hierarchy. Fear-based workplaces destroy creativity. People stop speaking honestly, stop taking initiative, stop experimenting. Because psychologically, fear narrows thinking, but trust expands thinking. This is why culture matters so much. Not free snacks, not office decorations. Real culture means how people communicate, how mistakes are handled, how pressure is managed, how respect is demonstrated. Culture is behavior repeated consistently, and leadership shapes that behavior constantly. The authors also emphasize something powerful. Don't create policies for rare problems. This idea is brilliant. Many businesses experience one unusual mistake, then create massive rules affecting everyone forever. One employee arrives late. Now strict systems punish the entire company. One customer abuses refunds. Now honest customers suffer complicated processes. Fear creates bureaucracy. And bureaucracy creates frustration. Instead of building endless rules, the authors encourage businesses to trust people more intelligently. Because excessive control usually signals insecurity. Healthy systems remain flexible, simple, human. And this section also discusses the importance of calm leadership during difficult moments. Because emotions spread inside teams rapidly. A panicked leader creates panicked employees. An angry leader creates fearful environments. But calmness creates stability. This doesn't mean pretending problems don't exist. It means responding thoughtfully instead of emotionally. And this becomes especially important during crises. Economic downturns, product failures, unexpected setbacks. Teams look toward leadership for emotional direction. And leaders who remain grounded create psychological safety. This section also explores the idea of respecting people's time. This sounds simple, yet many workplaces waste enormous amounts of human life carelessly. Unnecessary meetings, unclear instructions, constant interruptions. All of these things slowly drain motivation, because humans want meaningful progress, not endless busy work. And the authors repeatedly encourage businesses to remove friction wherever possible. Simpler systems, cleaner communication, fewer distractions. Because simplicity improves morale too. People feel less mentally overwhelmed. And overwhelmed people rarely produce their best work. This section also contains another powerful lesson. Don't hire for pleasure. Hire for pain. Meaning, don't add people simply because growth feels exciting. Hire only when a real consistent problem exists that cannot be solved through smarter systems or clearer priorities. Because every hire permanently changes the shape of a company. And the best teams are not always the largest. Often they are the clearest. Focused people working toward understandable goals. Without unnecessary complexity. Without ego-driven hierarchy. Without endless noise. And perhaps the deepest message inside this part is this. Leadership is not about controlling people. It's about creating clarity, creating trust, creating environments where meaningful work can happen naturally. Because the best leaders rarely feel loud or dramatic. They create calm direction, clear expectations, focused momentum. And in a world filled with chaos, distraction, and constant noise, that kind of leadership becomes incredibly powerful. Part 12. The end of busyness. There's a strange problem in modern society. People are busier than ever before. Yet many feel less fulfilled than ever before. Calendars are full. Notifications never stop. Meetings consume entire days. But despite all this movement, countless people secretly feel stuck. Why? Because busyness and progress are not the same thing. And this is one of the deepest messages inside REWORK. The authors challenge the entire culture of constant activity. Because modern work often rewards appearance instead of outcomes. Someone rushing around all day looks productive. Someone quietly thinking deeply may look inactive. But meaningful work rarely feels loud. It often feels calm, focused, intentional. And this idea changes everything. Because many people unconsciously perform busyness. They answer emails instantly, join unnecessary meetings, multitask constantly, not always because it helps, but because it creates the feeling of importance. Yet if you observe truly effective people carefully, many of them operate differently. They protect focus aggressively. They simplify schedules. They eliminate distractions. Because they understand something powerful. Attention is life. Where attention goes, energy follows. And modern society is designed to steal attention continuously. Social media, advertisements, notifications, entertainment. Everything competes for mental space. This creates a world filled with distraction but starving for depth. And depth is where meaningful work lives. A great book requires depth. A great company requires depth. A great relationship requires depth. But depth requires uninterrupted presence. Something increasingly rare today. This is why the authors repeatedly encourage businesses and individuals to eliminate unnecessary noise. Not every email deserves urgency. Not every meeting deserves attendance. Not every opportunity deserves pursuit. Saying no becomes survival. Because every unnecessary commitment fragments attention further. And fragmented attention weakens creativity. Imagine trying to build a puzzle while someone shakes the table every minute. That's how many people live mentally. Constant interruption. Constant stimulation. Constant urgency. No wonder exhaustion feels normal now. But the authors reject this entirely. They believe meaningful work should create clarity, not chaos. And one of the most important lessons in this section is this. Work expands to fill the time available. This means if you give a task an entire week, it often somehow takes a week. But constraints create focus. This is why deadlines sometimes increase productivity. Not because pressure itself is magical, but because limitations force prioritization. What truly matters here? That question becomes clearer when time is limited. And clarity creates speed. The authors repeatedly encourage people to stop wasting energy on non-essential work. Because many tasks feel productive emotionally while producing little real value. Busy work creates the illusion of progress. Real progress creates results. There's a difference. Think about someone organizing productivity apps for 3 hours instead of actually working. Or endlessly researching ideas without executing them. Planning can become avoidance. Preparation can become procrastination. The mind cleverly disguises fear as productivity sometimes. And this section challenges readers to become brutally honest about how they spend time. Because time disappears quietly. One distracted day becomes a distracted year. And eventually people wake up wondering where their energy went. This is why the authors emphasize simplicity repeatedly throughout the book. Simple systems reduce friction. Simple communication reduces confusion. Simple priorities reduce overwhelm. Complexity drains life force. And modern life constantly pushes people toward unnecessary complexity. More apps. More subscriptions. More commitments. More decisions. But every extra thing consumes mental bandwidth. This section also discusses the power of boundaries. Now boundaries sound restrictive initially. But boundaries actually create freedom. A company refusing unnecessary meetings protects productivity. A creator limiting distractions protects creativity. A person protecting personal time protects mental health. Without boundaries, everything begins consuming everything else. Work invades rest. Stress invades relationships. Noise invades thought. And eventually people lose the ability to feel present anywhere. The authors encourage readers to stop glorifying overwhelm. Because overwhelm is not proof of importance. Sometimes it's proof of poor prioritization. Or weak boundaries. Or excessive distraction. And this becomes incredibly important because modern technology created a dangerous illusion. That humans should always be available. Always connected. Always responsive. Always reachable. But constant availability destroys deep focus. Great work often requires temporary disconnection. Silence. Solitude. Stillness. And many of history's greatest thinkers understood this deeply. Writers disappeared into isolation to create books. Inventors spent long periods thinking quietly. Artists protected solitude fiercely. Because original thinking rarely emerges from non-stop noise. This section also explores the emotional addiction to urgency. Some people unconsciously create chaos because calmness feels unfamiliar. They rush constantly. Overcommit constantly. React constantly. And eventually urgency becomes identity. But urgency and importance are not the same thing. A ringing phone feels urgent. But deep long-term work is usually more important. And deep work often feels quiet. Slow. Invisible. That's why society sometimes undervalues it initially. Because visible busyness attracts more attention than invisible progress. Yet invisible progress changes lives over time. A person practicing daily improves quietly. A writer publishing consistently builds skill quietly. A business improving systems gradually becomes stronger quietly. Compounding rarely looks dramatic in the beginning. But over years, small consistent effort becomes extraordinary. And the authors repeatedly encourage sustainability instead of burnout. Because many people operate in emotional extremes. Periods of intense overwork followed by collapse. But meaningful long-term success requires rhythm. Consistency. Balance. Not endless self-destruction. This section also challenges another dangerous myth. That technology automatically improves productivity. Technology can help. But it can also amplify distraction massively. A phone can teach you anything in the world. Or destroy 6 hours of attention without you noticing. Tools themselves are neutral. What matters is intentionality. And intentionality requires awareness. Most people drift through modern life reactively. Responding constantly instead of choosing consciously. The authors encourage a different philosophy. Be deliberate. Choose carefully what deserves your time. Because your life is ultimately built from repeated attention. And perhaps the most powerful message hidden inside this section is this. You do not need to fill every moment to create a meaningful life. Space matters. Rest matters. Thinking matters. A musician needs silence between notes. A painting needs empty space. A conversation needs pauses. Without space, beauty disappears into noise. Life works the same way. And maybe the reason so many people feel exhausted today is not because they're doing too little, but because they're carrying too much that never truly mattered. Too many distractions. Too many obligations. Too many unnecessary complexities. And once those things are removed, clarity returns. Energy returns. Purpose returns. Because in the end, the goal is not to become endlessly busy. The goal is to build a life and work that actually means something. And sometimes, the most productive thing you can do is less. Part 13. Build something that lasts. In today's world, speed is everywhere. Fast content. Fast trends. Fast growth. Fast success stories. Everything feels temporary. A new app becomes famous overnight, then disappears months later. A creator goes viral, then gets forgotten. A company explodes quickly, then collapses quietly. And because of this culture, many people become obsessed with short-term attention instead of long-term value. But REWORK encourages something completely different. Build something that lasts, not just something that trends. This idea feels simple, but it changes the entire mindset of business and creativity. Because when people chase only short-term growth, they often sacrifice trust. They prioritize hype over quality, speed over sustainability, attention over substance. And eventually, reality catches up. But businesses built around genuine usefulness survive longer. Because usefulness never goes out of style. People will always value clarity, trust, simplicity, reliability. Technology changes. Human psychology changes slowly. And the authors deeply understood this. That's why their philosophy throughout the book avoids chasing unnecessary trends. Instead, they focus on timeless principles. Solve real problems. Communicate honestly. Keep things simple. Respect people's time. These ideas remain powerful regardless of industry changes. This section also discusses an important truth many people avoid. Growth can become addictive. At first, growth feels exciting. More users, more revenue, more attention. But eventually, some companies begin growing without purpose. Growth becomes the goal itself. And this creates dangerous behavior. Businesses start adding unnecessary products, expanding recklessly, chasing markets they don't understand. All because slowing down feels emotionally uncomfortable. Society celebrates expansion constantly. But the authors ask a profound question. What are you actually trying to build? A meaningful business? Or an endless machine demanding constant escalation? Because endless growth often destroys simplicity. And simplicity was usually the original advantage. Think about many beloved small companies. Customers loved them because they felt personal, focused, human. Then aggressive scaling begins. Processes multiply. Support weakens. Quality drops. Eventually customers say, "It doesn't feel the same anymore." Because the soul disappeared beneath expansion. This is why the authors repeatedly encourage intentionality. Growth should support your mission, not consume it. And this applies personally too. Many people chase achievements automatically without questioning why. More money, more status, more recognition. But eventually, some discover they climbed the wrong mountain entirely. Success externally, emptiness internally. That's why REWORK feels deeper than a normal business book sometimes. It quietly asks readers to rethink the purpose of work itself. Why are you building this? For ego? For approval? For endless competition? Or for freedom? Meaning? Contribution? These questions matter enormously, because your answers shape the life you create. This section also explores the idea of staying true to your values during success. Now this becomes difficult because success creates pressure. Pressure from customers, investors, competitors, public expectations. And many businesses slowly compromise themselves trying to satisfy everyone. But the strongest brands protect their identity carefully. They know what they stand for. And equally important, what they refuse to become. This takes courage. Because short-term opportunities constantly tempt people away from long-term vision. Imagine a company built around simplicity suddenly adding endless complicated features just because competitors are doing it. At first it may seem smart, but eventually they lose the very thing customers originally loved. This happens in personal life too. People lose themselves trying to imitate others, chasing trends, chasing validation, chasing comparison. And comparison quietly destroys clarity. Because once you obsess over what others are doing, you stop listening to yourself. The authors encourage independence of thought repeatedly throughout the book. Build according to your values, not according to pressure. This section also discusses the importance of saying no even after becoming successful. Now this is difficult, because success attracts endless opportunities, partnerships, expansions, collaborations, publicity. Everything appears attractive. But every new commitment consumes energy, and energy is limited. That's why disciplined businesses stay focused even while growing. They protect simplicity intentionally. And protecting simplicity becomes harder with success. Because people assume success means constant addition. More products, more services, more features. But sometimes greatness comes from refinement instead. Doing fewer things exceptionally well. Think about world-class restaurants. Many don't offer giant menus. They master specific experiences deeply. Focus creates excellence, and excellence creates loyalty. This section also emphasizes another powerful idea. You are building your reputation every single day, not only through big moments, but through small repeated behavior. How you treat customers, how you communicate, how you respond under pressure. Reputation compounds slowly, and trust compounds slowly too. That's why quick shortcuts often become dangerous. A company may fake success temporarily, manipulate attention temporarily, overpromise temporarily, but eventually, truth surfaces. Reality always wins long-term. The authors strongly believe sustainable businesses should be grounded in authenticity. Because authenticity scales better emotionally. Pretending becomes exhausting. Honesty creates stability. And this section also touches something deeply human. Enjoying the process itself. Many people postpone happiness until some future milestone. I'll relax after success. I'll enjoy life once I achieve more. But goals continuously move. One milestone becomes another. And eventually people spend decades chasing future satisfaction. The authors challenge this indirectly. Maybe the process itself should feel meaningful. Maybe work should not require constant suffering. Maybe success without peace is incomplete. And this idea feels revolutionary in hustle culture. Because hustle culture often glorifies misery. But meaningful work should energize more than it destroys. Yes, challenges will exist. Stress will exist. Difficult periods will happen. But if the entire journey feels empty, the destination rarely fixes that emptiness. This section also explores longevity in business. And longevity often comes from adaptability, not stubbornness. The world changes constantly. Technology evolves. Customer behavior shifts. Industries transform. Businesses surviving long-term stay flexible mentally. They learn continuously, experiment continuously, improve continuously, but they do not abandon their core values. That balance matters deeply. Adapt externally, stay grounded internally. And perhaps the deepest lesson hidden inside this section is this. A meaningful business is not only something that earns money, it's something that reflects who you are. Your values, your thinking, your standards. That's why building honestly matters. Because eventually, your work becomes part of your identity. And no amount of external success feels fulfilling if you secretly dislike what you built to achieve it. The authors understood this clearly. That's why REWORK never feels obsessed only with profit. It feels obsessed with freedom, clarity, simplicity, meaningful creation. And maybe that's the real definition of lasting success. Not building the biggest thing, but building something real, something useful, Something honest that still feels worth believing in years later. Part 14. The final rework. At some point in life, every person faces a quiet realization. The rules they blindly followed may not actually lead where they hoped. Work harder. Sacrifice more. Stay busier. Keep climbing. Society repeats these ideas constantly. Yet millions of people following those exact rules still feel exhausted, disconnected, and unfulfilled. And this is why Rework became more than just a business book for so many people. It challenged an entire mindset. Not only about business, but about work itself. About success itself. About life itself. Throughout this journey, the authors repeatedly destroyed modern myths one by one. You do not need massive funding to begin. You do not need giant teams. You do not need endless meetings. You do not need workaholic lifestyles. You do not need complicated plans stretching 10 years into the future. What you need is clarity, action, focus, honesty, and the courage to start before certainty arrives. Because certainty rarely arrives. This is perhaps one of the most important lessons in the entire book. Most people are waiting for a feeling that successful people never actually had. Perfect confidence. But confidence is built through movement, not before movement. The creator gains confidence by creating. The entrepreneur gains confidence by building. The speaker gains confidence by speaking. Action creates identity, and this changes how you see yourself completely. Once you repeatedly show up and build, you stop feeling like someone trying to become something. You become it. Quietly. Naturally. And another powerful truth running throughout the book is this. Small is not weakness. Modern society worships size constantly. Bigger companies. Bigger audiences. Bigger lifestyles. But bigger often creates fragility too. More stress. More complexity. More politics. Meanwhile, smaller focus systems can remain agile, calm, and deeply effective. The authors themselves proved this through the company they built. A lean team. Simple systems. Clear priorities. And yet their influence reached millions. Because influence does not always come from size. Sometimes it comes from clarity. And perhaps that's what makes this philosophy so refreshing. It gives people permission to stop pretending. Permission to stop performing busyness. Permission to stop chasing unnecessary complexity. Permission to build differently. This matters deeply because modern culture often pressures people into lives they never consciously chose. Wake up exhausted. Rush constantly. Answer notifications endlessly. Sacrifice peace for productivity. Then repeat forever. But Rework asks a dangerous question. What if work could feel simpler? Not easy, but simpler. More intentional. More human. And this question changes everything. Because once people realize many traditional business rules are optional, freedom begins. You don't have to imitate broken systems. You don't have to chase every trend. You don't have to expand endlessly. You can choose differently. That idea alone feels revolutionary. This final part also reminds readers that meaningful work is ultimately about usefulness. Not appearance. Not status. Not corporate image. Real value comes from solving real problems, helping real people, creating things that genuinely improve life in some way. That's why authenticity matters so much. Because authenticity creates trust, and trust creates longevity. People eventually forget hype, but they remember businesses, creators, and leaders who made life easier, clearer, or more meaningful. This section also emphasizes the importance of adaptability. Because the world will continue changing rapidly. Technology will evolve. Industries will transform. New opportunities will appear. And the people who survive long-term will not necessarily be the biggest or loudest. Often they'll be the most flexible, the most willing to learn, the most willing to simplify. Rigidity breaks under pressure. Adaptability bends and survives. And this idea applies far beyond business. Relationships require adaptation. Creativity requires adaptation. Life itself requires adaptation. The authors repeatedly encourage experimentation because experimentation keeps people alive mentally. Curiosity keeps people growing. The moment people believe they already know everything, growth stops. This is why beginners sometimes outperform experts. Beginners stay curious. Experts sometimes become trapped by old assumptions. And rework constantly challenges assumptions. That's the heart of the entire book. Question unnecessary rules. Question inherited beliefs. Question systems that create stress without creating value. Not rebelliously for the sake of rebellion, but intelligently, thoughtfully. Because progress begins when people stop blindly accepting outdated ideas. This final section also touches something deeply emotional. Freedom. Not only financial freedom, mental freedom, creative freedom, freedom from unnecessary noise, freedom from constant approval seeking, freedom from pretending. The authors understood something many people discover too late. Success without freedom eventually feels empty. A giant business that destroys your peace may not actually be success. A career that consumes your entire life may not actually be winning. A lifestyle built entirely around stress may not actually be ambition. This is why the philosophy of rework feels so human underneath the business advice. It reminds people that work is part of life, not life itself. And balance matters. Health matters. Relationships matter. Rest matters. Joy matters. Without those things, achievement becomes hollow. This final part also reinforces the power of simplicity again and again. Because simplicity is timeless. Simple communication. Simple systems. Simple priorities. Complexity impresses temporarily. Simplicity endures. And simplicity creates clarity. Once clarity appears, decision-making becomes easier. Focus becomes stronger. Stress becomes lighter. You stop wasting energy on things that never truly mattered. And perhaps the deepest message hidden inside the entire book is this. You already have enough to begin. Maybe not enough to build everything immediately, but enough to start. Enough to learn. Enough to move. And movement changes everything. One step creates momentum. Momentum creates confidence. Confidence creates growth. That's how meaningful journeys actually happen. Not through giant dramatic moments, but through small consistent action repeated over time. And maybe that's the real reason this book connected with so many people around the world. Because beneath all the business advice, it gave people permission to rethink the way they live, to work with more intention, to create with more honesty, to simplify what became unnecessarily complicated, and ultimately, to build a life that feels lighter, clearer, calmer, and more meaningful.